My life was stolen by a lie, and the one who told it was my own brother's wife. The injustice of it was a physical weight, a constant, suffocating pressure on my chest that made every breath a conscious effort for 2 long years. I became a ghost in my own family, a pariah accused of betrayal so vile it shattered every bond one had ever cherished. My name is Daniel, and I was 25 when my world was meticulously dismantled, piece by piece, by someone I called a friend. My older brother, David, had been married to Clara for 4 years. David, 30 at the time, was more than a brother. He was my benchmark for what a good man should be. Clara, 29, had woven herself into the fabric of our family with such skill that she seemed like a natural, irreplaceable thread. We were a trio, the three of us. Sunday dinners at our parent house were a sacred ritual, filled with loud laughter and the familiar, comforting clatter of dishes. Our group text was a constant, buzzing lifeline of stupid memes, daily check-ins, and inside jokes. I trusted Clara without a second thought. She was a sister I never had, a confidant. That trust, I would learn, was merely the stage upon which she would perform her destruction. The beginning of the end was deceptively mundane. It was after a casual weekend barbecue at David and Clara's apartment. David had to rush off for a last-minute work trip, a cloud of apology hanging over him as he grabbed his bag. I stayed behind, as I often did, to help Clara with a mountain of plates and glasses. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across their messy living room. As I was gathering the last of the bottles, she followed me into the kitchen. She was quiet, her usual vivacity dimmed. "You okay, Clara?" I asked, leaning against the counter. She sighed, a heavy theatrical sound. "It's just, things have been tough with David lately. Constant fighting about money, about the future. It feels like we're on different planets sometimes." Her voice was laced with vulnerability that immediately put me in protective older brother mode. I nodded, offering platitudes. "All couples go through that. You two are solid. You'll figure it out." I meant every word. Then the atmosphere shifted. The air grew thick and charged. She stepped closer, well into my personal space. Her eyes, which usually sparkled with mischief, were now intense and unsettling. "You know, sometimes I wish I met someone like you first, Daniel. You're so much more understanding than David. You actually listen." A cold dread trickled down my spine. I forced an awkward laugh, trying to defuse the situation. "Yeah, well, he's a great guy. You two will work it out." I took a deliberate step back, creating a physical boundary. She ignored it, closing the distance again and placing a deliberate, lingering hand on my forearm. "We don't have to tell him we talked. It could be our little secret. No one ever has to know." I recoiled as if her touch were acid. I physically shook her hand off my arm, my own voice turning hard and sharp. "Clara, what you're suggesting is disgusting. You are married to my brother. He is my brother. Stop this. Right now." The transformation in her face was instantaneous and terrifying. The vulnerable mask melted away, replaced by a cold, flat hardness. Her eyes narrowed. "Fine," she spat, the word like a shard of glass. "Forget I said anything. You've completely misread a friendly moment. You always were a little too sensitive." With that, she turned on her heel and walked out of the kitchen, leaving me standing there, my heart hammering against my ribs, a cocktail of shock, fury, and nauseating fear swirling in my gut. I fled the apartment without another word. For days, I was a mess. I wrestled with the burden of what had happened. Do I tell David? He was already stressed with work. Would he believe me? Or would he see it as a pathetic attempt by his little brother to cause trouble? The risk felt too great. I made a catastrophic miscalculation. I decided silence and distance were my safest allies. I invented excuses. work deadlines, a fake stomach bug, to skip the next few family gatherings. I prayed the whole sordid incident would simply dissolve into the past, a bizarre, forgotten moment. I was a fool. I had underestimated Clara's capacity for malice. About a month later, the axe fell. My phone rang. It was David. His voice wasn't just cold. It was hollow, devoid of all the warmth that usually lived there. "I need to see you. Now." It wasn't a request. It was a command. I drove to his place with a sense of impending doom, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. When he opened the door, he didn't meet my eyes. He just walked back into the living room. Clara was perched on the edge of the sofa, the picture of devastation. Tear tracks glistening on her cheeks. Without a word, David thrust his phone into my hands. On the screen were screenshots of text messages allegedly from my number to Clara's. They were a work of horrific fiction. In them, I was professing a secret, all-consuming love for her. I was telling her David was a fool who didn't appreciate her. I was begging her to meet me in secret, to leave him, to explore the once-in-a-lifetime connection we shared. The language was cliché, but chillingly effective. One message read, "I can't stop thinking about you. Every time I see you with him, it kills me. We can't help how we feel." The floor seemed to liquefy beneath my feet. "This isn't real." I choked out, my voice strangled. "David, I swear on my life, I never sent these." "She's lying. She came on to me at the barbecue after you left, and when I rejected her, she must have made these up. It's a setup." Clara let out a perfectly timed, choked sob, burying her face in her hands. "Why are you doing this, Daniel?" she wailed, her voice trembling with a convincing blend of hurt and indignation. "I showed you these messages to prove how uncomfortable you were making me, to ask you to stop this harassment, and now you're turning it around on me?" She looked up at David, her eyes wide and pleading. "He's been doing this for months, David. The little comments, the way he looks at me when he thinks no one's watching. I didn't want to say anything because he's your brother. I didn't want to break your family apart. It was a diabolical, brilliant performance. David, looking from his weeping wife, the woman he loved, to the damning evidence on his phone, broke. The last thread of his doubt snapped. He exploded. He screamed in my face, calling me a traitor, a snake, a pathetic, disloyal piece of garbage. He said I had violated the one bond that was supposed to be unbreakable. I was sobbing now too, begging, pleading. I thrust my own phone at him. Look at my messages. There's nothing there. Check the records." He batted my hand away. "You deleted them. Clara said you would. She warned me you'd try to lie and gaslight your way out of this." He was spitting the words, his face contorted in a rage I had never seen before. Get out of my house. I never want to see you again." The aftermath was a nuclear winter for my life. David and Clara launched a preemptive smear campaign, telling my parents their twisted version of events before I even had a chance to process the shock. My mother, who loved Clara like a daughter, was heartbroken. Her voice on the phone was a whisper of profound disappointment. "I raised you to be a better man than this, Daniel. I don't know who you are anymore. My father was a bastion of cold fury. You will take responsibility for your actions. You will apologize to your brother and to Clara. This is not up for discussion. My extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, and the friends we'd had since childhood, were all fed the poison. I was Daniel, the brother who had tried to seduce his brother's wife. I was a homewrecker, a predator lurking within the family. The looks I received at the grocery store, the sudden silence when I walked into a room, the friends who stopped returning my calls. It was a death by 1,000 social cuts. I was completely isolated, adrift in a sea of their judgment. The only flicker of doubt came from my cousin, Rachel. She called me, her voice hesitant. Dan, it doesn't sound like you. It feels off. But without proof, without anything to counter Clara's fabricated screenshots, her support remained passive, a quiet sympathy that did nothing to stop the avalanche. The anger and the suffocating sense of injustice became my constant companions. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I was a ghost in my own hometown, haunting the places that once brought me joy. I had to escape. A lifeline appeared in the form of promotion I had been tentatively offered months earlier. It was based in Seattle, a world away from the suffocating drama of my life in Chicago. I accepted without a second thought. I packed my belongings into my car, a grim and solitary task, and began the long drive west, leaving the ghost of Daniel the betrayer in my rear-view mirror. In Seattle, I built a new life from the ground up. I poured myself into my work, the sterile logic of my job a welcome contrast to the emotional chaos I had left behind. I made new friends who knew nothing of my past. I found a good therapist. And after a year of healing, I met Anna. She was warm, smart, and grounded. I waited several months before I told her the whole sordid story, my heart in my throat. Her response was to take my hand and say, "I am so sorry that happened to you. I believe you." Those 4 words, "I believe you," were a magic spell that began to dissolve a curse I had lived under for so long. For 2 years, my contact with my family was a barren landscape. Brief, strained calls with my parents always circled back to the same question. "When are you going to stop this stubbornness and apologize to your brother?" I had zero contact with David or Clara. I would occasionally see their life through the curated, happy lens of social media. Photos from vacations, anniversaries, family gatherings I wasn't invited to. It was a perfect life, built on the foundation of the lie that had exiled me. Then, on a Tuesday evening, the rain lashing against my Seattle apartment windows, my phone rang. The caller ID showed my parents' home number. A jolt of anxiety shot through me. Calls from that number were always tense. I answered, bracing myself. It wasn't my mother or father. It was David, and he was crying, not just sniffling, but deep, ragged, gut-wrenching sobs that seemed to tear their way out his chest. My blood ran cold. My first terrifying thought was that one of our parents had died. "David? David, what's wrong? What happened?" I managed to ask, my own pulse roaring in my ears. It took him a full minute to form a coherent sentence. He was gasping for air, his voice thick with tears and what sounded like shame. When the words finally came, they triggered a seismic shift in the very bedrock of my reality. "I'm so sorry, Danny. I was wrong." She lied. About everything. Everything. I sank onto my couch, the room tilting and spinning around me. He explained, his voice cracking with every other word, that he had accidentally found a secret phone hidden in the inner pocket of Clara's old gym bag in the back of the closet. He'd charged it out of morbid curiosity. On it, he discovered a world of deception. She was in the midst of a long-term affair with a man from her office. The affair, as evidenced by the message history, had been going on for over 3 years. It predated her accusation against me by more than a year. Confronted with the irrefutable evidence, Clara's entire facade crumbled. In a storm of panic, anger, and spite, she admitted the truth. She confessed that she had grown bored and resentful of David and had been looking for a way out of the marriage without being cast as the villain. Her pass at me had been a test, a reckless gamble. When I had rejected her so vehemently and morally, she saw a golden opportunity. She could paint me as the unstable, obsessed brother-in-law. By making me the villain, she made David her protector, her hero. It solidified her position and gave her a powerful, sympathetic narrative. She never anticipated he would cut me off so completely, But when he did, she simply rode the wave, cementing a lie with her fabricated texts and planted seeds of doubt. David was utterly destroyed. The man I heard on the phone was a hollowed-out version of my brother. She told me she used some app to make those texts. She said for months she'd been making little comments to me, joking that you had a crush on her or that you were always a little too competitive with me. She made me doubt you, Danny. I was such a blind, stupid fool. I don't expect you to ever forgive me, but I had to tell you. I had to hear your voice. Silence stretched between us, a vast chasm filled with 2 years of pain. The moment of vindication I had fantasized about for so long was here, and it felt nothing like I imagined. It was hollow, devastating, and inextricably linked to the profound agony of the brother I loved. Where are you now? I finally asked, my voice quiet. I'm in a hotel, he said, sounding like a lost child. I kicked her out. I've already filed for divorce. Mom and Dad, they're in shock. They don't know what to say to me. I don't know what to say to them. I took a deep, shuddering breath. The hot coal of anger in my chest was still there, glowing fiercely, but it was now smothered by a heavier, more primal emotion, a fierce, protective love for my broken brother. Get on a plane, David, I said, my voice firmer than it had been in years. Come to Seattle. You can stay with me. The wave of relief that poured out of him was so palpable I could almost feel it through the phone. He arrived the next day, a gaunt and haunted silhouette of the man I remembered. The reunion at my apartment was stiff and emotionally charged. There were no dramatic, movie-style embraces. I looked at him, at the deep lines of stress and shame etched on his face, and I spoke my truth. I need you to know that I'm still furious. What you did, what you believe without a single question, it broke me, David. It broke something inside me that I'm not sure can ever be fully fixed. He nodded, fresh tears welling in his red-rimmed eyes. He didn't try to excuse himself. I know, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you. If you'll let me, I don't deserve it, but I'll try. Over the next week, he stayed in my guest room, and we began the long, painful process of untangling the past. We talked for hours, late into the night. I finally got to tell my side of the story from that night in the kitchen, in excruciating detail. He listened, truly listened, without interruption or defense. In return, he shared more chilling details of Clara's manipulation, how she would subtly undermine my character, suggesting I was jealous of his career success, that I was untrustworthy with secrets, that my dating life was a sign of instability. It was a horrifying portrait of long-term, premeditated psychological warfare. My parents called, their voices heavy with a grief and shame, so profound it was difficult to listen to. They apologized over and over, their words tumbling out in a desperate rush. They admitted they had been blinded by their love for Clara and their desperate desire to preserve the picture-perfect family they thought they had. The conversations were agonizing, but they were the first necessary steps on a very long road. David's divorce proceedings began. Clara, faced with a mountain of evidence from the secret phone and her own recorded admissions, David, upon my advice, had recorded their final confrontation, had little room to maneuver. She moved in with her co-worker almost immediately, and the divorce was finalized with surprising speed, largely favoring David. About a month into his stay, the situation took a darker turn. Clara, apparently enraged that David was moving on and that he had reconciled with me, began a campaign of harassment. She started sending me long, rambling, and increasingly unhinged emails. She accused me of brainwashing David, of orchestrating her downfall out of petty jealousy. She claimed in a bizarre twist that I had always been in love with her, and that my rejection was a lie designed to manipulate her. I meticulously saved every email, every text, building a file of evidence. Then she escalated from digital to physical. One Saturday morning, as David and I were leaving my apartment building to grab coffee, we found her lying in wait in the lobby. She looked haggard, her hair unkempt, her eyes wild. She completely ignored me, her focus solely on David. "David, we need to talk." "Please," she pleaded, her voice trembling with a desperate energy. "We can fix this. It was all a misunderstanding. We have nothing to talk about. Clara, the divorce is final. Leave us alone," David said, his voice steady but cold as iron. Something in her snapped. "This is his fault," she shrieked, whirling to point a trembling, accusatory finger at me. Her voice echoed in the quiet lobby. "He poisoned you against me. You were never this cold before he got his claws into you. You took everything from me." I stepped slightly in front of David, my own anger, banked for so long, surging to the surface. "You did this to yourself. Clara, you lied. You cheated. You have no one to blame but yourself." My words were the final trigger. With a guttural scream, she lunged at me, nails outstretched like claws. I sidestepped, and David moved with a speed I didn't know he still possessed, grabbing her arms and restraining her as she thrashed and screamed obscenities. The building manager, alerted by the commotion, was already on the phone with 911. The police arrived within minutes, witnessing her hysterical state firsthand. They arrested her for disorderly conduct, assault, and threatening behavior. It was a final, ugly, and undeniable confirmation of her instability for everyone, especially my family. While the incident was terrifying, it served a grim purpose. It was a shock to the system my parents needed. Hearing that their former daughter-in-law had attempted to physically assault their son, and their exonerated son finally jolted them out of their last vestiges of denial. Their support became unwavering, unequivocal. We began having weekly, heartfelt video calls, and the genuine, arduous work of reconnection began. David decided to make a clean start in Seattle. He found a job at his field and rented an apartment a 20-minute drive from mine. We started rebuilding our brotherhood, brick by painful brick. It was different, forever scarred, but there was a new depth to it, a hard-won appreciation forged in the fires of a shared nightmare. We continued therapy, both individually and together, to navigate the complex map of our anger, grief, and tentative hope. A year after David's arrival, our parents flew out for a visit. It was the first time we had all been together in over 3 years. The first dinner was a minefield of awkward silences and unspoken apologies that hung heavy in the air. But as the days passed, the old rhythms began to return, tentatively at first, then with more confidence. We laughed. We shared old, happy stories. We began to build new memories, fragile but real. The forgiveness was not yet complete, a wound that deep leaves a permanent scar. But the will to heal, the love that fueled that will, was finally, powerfully present. The saga of Clara was over. We heard through the grapevine that her relationship with the co-worker imploded spectacularly, and she moved back to her home state. I felt nothing. No schadenfreude, no anger. She was simply a ghost, finally laid to rest. Now, my life is truly my own again. The lie that defined me, that dictated my every move for 2 years, has been erased by the hard, bright light of truth. The betrayal was as profound as it gets, but the redemption, though messy and painful, was real. I have my brother back. I have my family back. And most importantly, I have myself back, no longer living as a ghost in my own story, no longer shackled by a sin I never committed. The journey taught me that the truth, no matter how deeply it's buried, has a relentless, undeniable force. It will claw its way to the surface. And sometimes, against all odds, the most shattered bonds will be mended piece by painful, precious piece.